Stand by SOT1.
Standing.
10 seconds. Ready, rolling. Ready, SOT1.
Ready.
In 4, 3, 2, 1. Roll in.
From legendary Uncle Studios in beautiful Southern California, welcome to another edition of Work Comp Matters, the central location for you employees, you employers, and of course, we haven't forgotten about you damn independent contractors. And now, here's this week's edition of Work Comp Matters. It is November 22nd, 12 noon straight up Pacific Standard Time. Welcome to another edition of Work Comp Matters. We are brought to you by mancavepodcasting.com. If you want to do your own podcast, all you have to do is talk 818-357-4120 and mancavepodcasting.com. My empire. We will get your podcast streamed live. We will produce it. We will manage it. We will direct it. We will get it streamed live into the cloud forever, all for one low fee. mancavepodcasting.com. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Steve Appel. I'm joined by the madman across the water, Mr. John Scalia, out in Munich, Germany. And stories today that hopefully, we hope, are of interest to you employees, you employers, and of course, we have not forgotten about you damn independent contractors. Could Colorado's COVID surge presage what's next in California, John? Presage, presage? These are. We'll talk about that in a moment. I don't know. There apparently is no clear-cut end in sight for the pandemic. From the San Francisco Chronicle, Santa Cruz County brings back indoor mask mandate as coronavirus cases rise. Santa Cruz Sentinel, Santa Cruz County health officials issue indoor mask order starting November 21, and that was yesterday. From the Los Angeles Times, as another pandemic Thanksgiving nears, families navigate plans with unvaccinated relatives. From Axios, Thanksgiving COVID alarm as cases rise 20%. From Yahoo, one California family's worrisome experience with a mild case of COVID-19. And from the Associated Press, aka AP, U.S. opens COVID boosters to all adults and urges them 450 and over. But those are just some of the stories that we think are of interest to you employees, you employers, and independent contractors. But I wanted to talk because Man Cave Podcasting, Work Comp Matters, Steve Appel, John Scalia have gone into a new age. John got his iPhone 13 this weekend, and then we did a test run, the madman across the water, on Clubhouse today for 30 minutes. And that will probably go into mancavepodcasting.com. I think it was actually 24 minutes. And I wanted to spend the first half of the show, which otherwise colloquial known as my rant. And I wanted to ask John, what did you think about your first Clubhouse experience? John, did I indoctrinate you okay? Did I slide you in easily? And as I've warned you, are you afraid that Clubhouse is going to become very addictive?
Well, I think I had, enough addictions in my life. But in terms of the experience, it was really enjoyable. Yes. And you did ease me into it, although you sort of flooded me with all kinds of instructions on how it works.
Yeah, we had literally like 5 different vocal communications within like a half hour or an hour, and I spent like at one of those half hours giving you the functionality. But I interrupted you. Please continue.
Yeah, and it was really enjoyable. One of the things I enjoyed was, even though it was a small group that we had on Clubhouse, one was from, I had two females in the room, and one was from Sudan, which is obviously having problems today. Hopefully they've been solved. And the other was from South Korea. And then we had a guy who's a lawyer from Tanzania. So, the interesting thing was, there was people all over the world in completely different time zones, obviously, and you, of course. So that was interesting. It made it a lot of fun. It was interesting having a lawyer on the other side who practices in an African country asking me questions. So all in all, it was a very enjoyable experience. Although, as I pointed out to you, I do have to wait for my new charger to come in here, because the iPhone 13 does not charge off the same charger that my iPhone.
John, do you is that charger, is that on the secondhand market? Is it in the Apple Store? And if you feel comfortable, how much did that charger cost that did not come with your phone, and you have to pay extra for that to charge your iPhone 13 properly?
I love Apple and I love the Apple Store, but one of the things I've learned is never buy accessories at Apple, because it'll always cost you more than you can get it on Amazon. So I just came home and went on Amazon to get the charger. And on Amazon, the charger was all of 13 euros, which is like a little over 15 bucks.
I was going to say like 25 bucks or something, whereas Apple probably wanted 50 to 75, right?
I don't know what they want. I didn't ask, because, my experience in the past was, why bother when you talk about accessories with them, because it's always way more than you can get on Amazon. So I just came home and did that. I also ordered the plastic protecting case for the iPhone 13 on Amazon for some cheap amount. So yeah, but it's no big problem. I mean, the interesting thing was, I've got to say, the reason I love Apple is, I've been using this whole time an iPhone 6, which came out in 2014. And I asked
and that was my first iPhone. I then upgraded to the 8, and now, of course, I use the 11. And when I said, maybe, John, you could save a couple of bucks getting the 11, you didn't even know if they sold the 11 anymore. So, but I'm using the 11.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is, I wanted to use my iPhone 6 as a trade-in, and the sweet young thing who was waiting on me, she was brand new there. She was delightful, and she was very helpful. She plugged it into her phone to find out what my trade-in value was on my iPhone 6, and my trade-in value of my iPhone 6 was zero, because it's so old. There's no reason, there's nothing they can do with it. But it's a tribute to Apple that my iPhone 6 still works like a charm, and everything on it works perfectly. They also give you an option when you buy the iPhone how much memory you want. And, and they give you like 100, a jillion gigabytes and 2 jillion gigabytes. And, and so I looked at the lowest number, and I said, well, what have I got on my iPhone 6? And it was a fraction of the lowest number you could get on the iPhone 6.
Yeah. And I still have my iPhone 6. I believe I traded in my iPhone 8, but I still have my 6. So for making telephone calls only, it would probably be just perfect. But for internet activity, it's probably no good.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, my iPhone works fine for Google. It works fine on the net, works fine on everything I use it for. I mean, and it's an iPhone 6. And I'm amazed that it hasn't run out of memory space, but it's still there. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty amazing. It's a tribute to the quality of Apple, and also the treatment you get in Apple stores. The real reason I go there, there's 2 reasons I go there. One, I hate to sound like a shill for Apple, but I am. I mean, first of all, the quality in Apple is really pretty amazing. And secondly, my experience with the Apple stores, whenever you go in, whenever you have an issue, even when I had issues on my iPhone 6 not too long ago, or my iPad, which is also old, you could go in there and they will try to help. They will try, there's no, they're not jerking you around. And in fact, when we thought my iPad was dead, literally, I actually bought a brand new iPad. And I said, well, can I recycle the old one? When the guy did the magic to recycle my old iPad, it came back to life. I said, oh, can I cancel the transaction? And they said, yeah, you can cancel it. So every time I walked into the Apple store, I've been really happy with the way people treat me and how they try to help. So that's a big part of the reason why I'm sold on Apple.
Well, thank you all very listening. Thank you all very much for listening to Work Comp Matters. And as I've been saying before, and I will say now, and I will say again in the future, Clubhouse is the audio only social media of the future. And I've told this to John. I've told this to Scott of Legendary Uncle Studio. Monica agrees with me. I'm going to get all the people, or I'm going to continue to endorse all of my wonderful on-the-air personalities of mancavepodcasting.com. The Clubhouse is in the future. That is where we were going. That is where we are going. And all I can say is, people, point your steering wheels of your cars in the right direction, because those of you that have partnered with me for years now, and I want to continue to partner with you, but we're moving into the future, and Clubhouse is it. So once again, you are dialed into Work Comp Matters. We are brought to you by mancavepodcasting.com. If you want to do your own podcast, all you have to do is talk anywhere in the world, one small fee, and we will stream it online. We will manage it, produce it, direct it. We will get it online for you. And then in the cloud forever, all for one small fee. That's mancavepodcasting.com. Thanks for joining myself, Steve Appel, and John Scalia on Work Comp Matters, where we do our best to provide you with stories that we believe will be of interest to you employees, you employers, and of course, we haven't forgotten about you, damn independent contractors. And you can send me an email to wcexaminer@aol.com. You can put a comment in Facebook. Please feel free to share and do whatever you need. Once again, stories in the news. Could Colorado's COVID surge, Colorado is having problems with COVID. Let me just say that. Next, no clear-cut end in sight for the pandemic, from the San Francisco Chronicle. Santa Cruz County brings back indoor mask mandate, from the Los Angeles Times. As another pandemic Thanksgiving nears, families navigate plans with unvaccinated relatives. Wow. Talk about hitting the nail on the head. One California's family, worrisome experience. And the United States opens COVID boosters to all adults and urges them, specifically for those 50 years and up. Damn, I'm 61 years old. That means I have to get a booster. I had John, I've said it many times before. I had the J&J one and done, April 1, when I could first get it. Back then, people were telling me, well, Moderna doesn't matter, Pfizer doesn't matter, J&J doesn't matter. Get whatever you could get. That's what my family and my close friends told me. And I said, nah, I want the J&J one and done. I mean, I've been doing workers' comp, employment, labor law for 30 years. When someone tells me one and done and no one disagrees, that's why I wanted the one and done. And I got my one and done. And here I am 7 months later. And Steve, you got to get a booster. What is it about one and done that people don't understand? Okay. So I am anxious. Anxious is the wrong word. Apprehensive, that's the wrong word too. I'm conflicted on whether or not to get a booster. I think I should get a booster, but I go back to one and done. I mean, back then we knew, John, we knew 6-7 months ago that viruses mutate. Stronger versions of the virus will come out because life finds a way. Jurassic Park, right? life finds a way. Okay. So now we hear, well, the Delta variant is here. We didn't know that back then. Well, yeah, we knew that viruses mutated. We knew that for years. We knew that for decades. So I'm told by science, Dr. Fauci said one and done. And now Dr. Fauci has changed his mind. John, am I coming out of left field? Should I get a booster? Is it unreasonable for me to be a little apprehensive? What do you think before we go to our news?
Well, Steve, as you know, you could never come out of left field. That's my area. So first of all, yeah, but no, I don't think you're being unreasonable. I have the same question about my getting a booster, to be honest, because as you know from the start, I said based on my overall health and fitness, even though I'm in the dead category in terms of age, I didn't really think I needed to even get the shot. But I have no problem with vaccinations. The real problem is that, as you said, we know that these things mutate, and it was a national health emergency. So at the beginning, they were ecstatic to have a vaccine, and of course, they had no way of knowing how long the efficacy of the vaccines would last. I mean, in order to do that, you would have had to test the vaccines over a year period, and of course, they didn't want to have that timeline because everybody in the world wanted to be vaccinated quickly. So that's part of the problem. I mean, I'm sure that's part of the reason that ordinary vaccines don't come out this fast. So the fact that the immunity wanes over time, as you said, is really not all that surprising, both in terms of longevity and in terms of the fact that viruses mutate. The real problem is, and I was going to talk about this on the second story about Fauci changing the definition of fully vaccinated. The real problem is something I think doctors have created for themselves, and that is doctors have created this image that they're God. All right, you and I know that very well in our business, and so the problem is that once you create that image, you have to live with it, and the problem with having to live with it is the image is false. I mean, the Bible talks about don't have false gods. Well, they are, and the reality is that image is false, and so they should know it. But it's hard to get over it because if somebody says you're God, it's hard to disown it. I mean, we've seen lawyers like that. I mean, one of the hardest things to do as a lawyer is to remember that you're not God. I mean, and in the beginning when I was practicing law, lawyers were the ones in charge of the medical care that our clients got. All right. So, you had that very same feeling of, I'm controlling people's lives, and you were. But you've got to approach it with a certain humility that nothing really in the training of lawyers or academics or doctors prepares you for. I mean, you've got to approach it with a feeling of humility. The only thing I can compare it to, and I'll refer to, one of my least favorite things, organized religion. On the days when I acted as the minister in my church, I would always tell people, look, I'm just doing this because, well, basically I sort of got selected to do this. And it doesn't mean I'm special. And it doesn't mean that, I'm going to be doing any magic. And I think you have to keep that perspective in mind. You have to keep that perspective that you're not God. And doctors have created this false image, and now they're paying the price when they're saying, well, okay, we got to modify what we said. It's like when people come to lawyers and you say, well, we can compromise. You say, wait a minute, compromise. Isn't that the language of surrender? Isn't that the language of somebody who's willing to give up? Well, no, it's a language of reality. It's what it is.
And John, you rolled out the red carpet for me. So while you were talking, I brought up a YouTube video. I'm sure you've heard this before. It's been a while. I'm hoping it won't get us thrown into Facebook jail, but if it does, I'm willing to take the risk. I'm going to make an executive decision. So from the movie Malice, here is Alec Baldwin's 90 seconds on I Am God.
Do I have a God complex?
Dr. Kessler says yes.
Which makes me wonder if this lawyer has any idea as to the kind of grades one has to receive in college to be accepted at a top medical school. If you have the vaguest clue as to how talented someone has to be to lead a surgical team. I have an MD from Harvard. I am board certified in cardiothoracic medicine and trauma surgery. I have been awarded citations from 7 different medical boards in New England, and I am never, ever sick at sea. So I ask you, when someone goes into that chapel and they fall on their knees and they pray to God that their wife doesn't miscarry, or that their daughter doesn't bleed to death, or that their mother doesn't suffer acute neural trauma from post-operative shock, who do you think they're praying to? Now, you go ahead and read your Bible, Dennis, and you go to your church, and with any luck, you might win the annual raffle. But if you're looking for God, he was in operating room number 2 on November 17th, and he doesn't like to be second guessed. You ask me if I have a God complex? Let me tell you something. I am God.
And John, I'm assuming you probably last heard that like 20 years ago or something from the movie Malice with Alec Baldwin.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great piece. I mean, it's proof that there are some really good, clever writers out there, and I think
absolutely.
And it's very accurate. I mean, and he's right. I mean, the reason that they have the God exactly what he said. Yeah, and he says, yeah, do you know how hard you have to do to go into med school? Well, yeah, I do. To be honest with you, I never wanted to study hard enough to get those kind of grades. I mean, I still managed to get into UCLA law, which ain't too bad.
Yeah, but it's not only the grades, it's the dedication. I mean, the time it takes to graduate medical school is so far above any other field of study. It's not only the grades, it's the dedication.
Well, I'm not, it's an extra, I mean, med school is 4 years, law school is 3 years. I mean,
yeah, it's more than 4 years. I mean, the school itself is 4 years, but then you have residency and you have this and you have that. You're looking at like what, 8 to 11 years before you can go out on your own. Whereas in law school, you take 3 years, arguably, pass the bar, and boom.
Yeah, I've also said that that's part of the reason that doctors tend to be so right wing, because we enforce that kind of thing on them, and so of course they have a feeling of, anything I get in life I've clearly earned.
I got to tell you, John, not that I disagree. I agree with everything you said, except doctors being right winged. I've never heard that before in my life, that doctors are traditionally right-winged. I'm not familiar with that.
Well, I think if you took a poll of doctors, you would find the overwhelming majority are Republican. I'm not saying that they're extremists. I'm just saying that they tend to be on the Republican side of the wall.
I didn't know that either, but please continue.
Yeah, and what I say is, if you just the things you enumerated explains why that happens. I mean, clearly they're in a system where essentially you're right. They come out of med school and they go into residency where they're treated like slaves. I mean,
and John, they don't do 8-hour shifts. They don't do 12-hour shifts. They don't do 18. They do 36-hour shifts. They have to sleep at the hospital, right?
It's ridiculous. I agree. And the system that we use to produce doctors, we get the predictable results. I mean, if you have that kind of system, what are you going to end up with? You're going to end up with people who obviously are going to feel, well, God, whatever I earn, whatever I get, I certainly earned. They more than paid their dues. They did. And so, yeah, I think that whole system needs to be reworked. There was a time, believe it or not, when lawyers had a similar kind of system where they would come out of law school and they were basically hired almost as law clerks for a couple of years while they learned the trade. And finally, some law firm, I believe the first law firm that finally said this is ridiculous, was one in Milwaukee, where they said, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to pay our brand new associates a living wage. So yeah, I mean, it's the serf system that produces a sense of entitlement and self-righteousness and self-aggrandizement. And yes, they certainly, I mean, it's no mean achievement when you graduate from Harvard Med School and you're successful. And yeah, absolutely. But you still, you have to keep it in perspective. You're still a
I'm going to keep it in perspective right now. If God is going to get handed a scalpel and cut me open, I want it after he's had 8 to 12 hours of sleep and he's on the first 4 hours of his shift. I don't want God cutting me open on the 30th hour where he's gotten no sleep.
I've got a great story for you. I'm sure you knew Barry Satzman, right? Yeah, Barry was he was as you guys would say, and as I would say, he was a real mensch. And he was also, in my opinion, the best applicant's attorney in LA County. I mean, he was really, really good. Anyway, Barry had an old injury and he thought it was acting up in his back, and he went to the doctor and it turned out it was his heart. And he said, well, what do you want? He says, I'm checking you into the hospitals now. Barry says, really? He says, yeah. He says, we got to do bypass surgery. Barry says, when? Doctor says, as soon as possible. So Barry asked the doc, he said, well, when is that? The doc said, well, I can admit you now and do it for you, but I've been up doing 3 or 4 surgeries already. He said, I can do it tomorrow, first thing in the morning, if you're still alive. And Barry says, I'll take my chances. So he did exactly what you were saying. I want God to be refreshed and awake when he's operating on me.
Exactly. Well, you know what, John, we've been talking about doctors and the God complex and Clubhouse. So we've got 3 minutes left in the show. If you want to do one story, go ahead and take one story. But there you go. What can I say? That's where a live podcast takes us. John, you got about 2.5, 3 minutes. You can do one story if you want, or we'll close the show, whatever you want. But
well, I would just say this. I was going to read a story from NPR that talks about mental illness providing an increased risk of COVID. But the same article talks about other comorbidities that the mentally ill suffer. And it goes back to what I've been saying all along through this pandemic, which is, the people most at risk are the people with comorbidities, and the people who are generally healthy and generally okay probably are not that much at risk. But so much for that. And the last article I was going to deal with was why you can't get a cheap COVID test at home. The interesting thing was because the FDA was swamped with applications and they don't have the resources to handle it. So that's why it's not available, because it couldn't go through the approval procedure. So it goes back to the old thing of, everybody hates bureaucrats, but unless you have enough of them, guess what happens? That's what happens.
all right. Well, thank you very much. And let's see, Scott, you're muted. Just go. There you go. Okay, so we're going to probably end the show 1 minute early. And I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good as a producer, director, manager of the shows. And actually, you know what? I've got 12:29 right now. So I think we're going to end the show right on time. I want to thank you all very much for joining another edition of Work Comp Matters. We are part of the mancavepodcasting.com empire. That's right. That's my empire. Okay. If you want to do your own podcast from anywhere in the world, all you have to do is talk. All you need is a smartphone or a computer. mancavepodcasting.com. We will manage it, direct it, produce it, stream it live on social media, and put it into the cloud forever, all for one low fee. mancavepodcasting.com. I want to thank very much Scott Walton, legendary Uncle Studios, John Scalia, madman across the water, the socialist voice of reason, out in Munich, Germany, and all the good people back at mancavepodcasting.com. My name is Steve Appel. We'll see you again Monday, live, 12 noon Pacific Standard Time, for another edition of Work Comp Matters. Bye, everybody.